What's going on, Sports Nation? I'm your host, Kenneth Tiberius Clark, and you guys are listening to another fun episode of the Sports Exclusive podcast. So it is a great time of the year for sports. Basketball is coming to a close. The NFL is getting back started, right? I'm actually prepping the NFL draft in a few hours. And we actually just saw college basketball end, right? Which we'll dive into a little bit today. On the women's side, you had a very controversial topic, right? The last month and a half. But we everybody watched the women's NCAA basketball championship, and LSU beat the brakes off of Iowa. They beat them 102-85. Right, Iowa was on a run, and but the main thing that kind of stole the show, right, amongst all the excitement and talent was, the Angel Reese was taunting Caitlin Clark. These are two phenomenal athletes, and especially Caitlin Clark. She had become America's darling in the NCAA tournament for women. But she kind of hit her with the "you can't see me," the Tony Yayo. John Cena uses it as well. And I guess people felt like she was being a little bit too aggressive. It was very unsportsmanlike. It was distasteful. So a lot of people were very critical of Angel Reese. It got so bad, even our first lady, Jill Biden, was prepared to break a national tradition. She tried to invite Iowa to the White House, the losing team, which is I've never ever seen in sports. And thank God President Biden jumped in and put a stop to that, because that probably would have been a mutiny. But that's neither here nor there. But I think this kind of points to the very unrealistic conduct standards that we place on women in competitive sports. So if no one's going to do it, I guess I'll pose the question, or questions. At what point are we going to start treating these women as intense competitors, right? Or let's say we don't want to treat them that way. When are we going to start holding their male counterparts, right, the male athletes, to the same conduct standards? And that's what we'll be discussing a little bit today. So I actually pulled up three of my favorite examples in male sports, where you had these very polarizing moments that could have easily been perceived, and probably was by few, perceived as unsportsmanlike, but eventually was labeled as savage. That's what we do. We label unsportsman or disrespectful moments. We say, "Oh, that's savage." So I put up three examples. The first one, Floyd Mayweather, when he knocked out Victor Ortiz in the fourth round, 2011. I remember this fight like it was yesterday. Biggest waste of money pay-per-view wise. Right, Floyd Mayweather fights were sometimes, Lord forgive me, waste of money. But so either way, this was a very hyped up fight. Floyd Mayweather was clearly the creme de la creme. He was still on his high horse. Nobody could beat him. No one ever beat him. And then Victor Ortiz was this guy that rose up the ranks. He was 29-2-2 when he fought Floyd Mayweather. So, and he had 22 knockouts. So he had become one of the more feared, if not at the time, the most feared welterweight in boxing. And, he was the bigger, tougher fighter. People felt like he was going to get in there and he was going to bully Floyd a little bit. So, when you kind of compared the two, Victor Ortiz was this big, strong knockout specialist, and Floyd Mayweather was the smaller defensive technician. So everyone thought that Victor Ortiz would come in there and he would really make it a fight. But honestly, it just didn't go that way. Floyd Mayweather actually controlled the fight the entire time. He was actually the aggressor, right? Despite him being a defensive fighter, he was the aggressor. He was tagging Victor Ortiz all of the first three rounds, tagging him with the right hand, and he wouldn't let him get in. So you saw Victor Ortiz start to get a little bit frustrated, and he resorted to throwing a headbutt at the end of about one or two of his combinations. And in the process, he wound up cutting Floyd, right outside of his mouth. So, the referee splits him up. He obviously penalizes Victor Ortiz. And when he brings them back together to touch gloves, Victor Ortiz touches his glove and goes in to give like a, kind of like a little fugazi a little fake apology, oh, my bad and stuff like that. And Floyd hugs him. And that, as they're separating, coming out of the hug, Floyd hits him with a left hook and knocks him out. So everyone there was people were split on it. They felt like it was a little dirty by Floyd. They felt like he should have let Victor Ortiz kind of gain his bearings before resuming the fight. But the truth is, as much as we didn't like it, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. It was funny, but I wasn't the biggest fan of how he won the fight. But it was legal. Victor Ortiz, the fight had been resumed. Victor Ortiz was supposed to protect himself. And Victor Ortiz resorted to some dirty, he throwing headbutts and stuff like that. He resorted to some dirty tactics to give himself an edge as well. So, you can only say so much. So it was a controversial moment, but it was definitely one of the more exciting moments in boxing, at least for me, within the past 15 to 20 years. So that's one. Two, and this is, everyone knows me, big football fan. And that's when Michael Crabtree and Aqib Talib have got into a fight. Aqib Talib actually snatched Michael Crabtree's chain. He did it not once, but twice. So just quick backstory on these guys. Obviously, division rivals. Aqib Talib played for the Broncos. Michael Crabtree played for the Raiders at the time. That competitive Jack Del Rio squad, Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, then then obviously he was the other receiver. And I guess over the years they, had their exchanges and they had grown to not like each other. Plus I think they grew up around the same area. So you just never know what the true history is. But long story short, these guys weren't fans of each other. So this was the first time this happened, was the end of the 2016 season. I want to say it was New Year's Day. Yeah, it's New Year's Day. And I guess before the game, one of the Broncos coaches say, "Oh, these Raiders players think it's a fashion show. They want to wear chains and earrings. So I guess Aqib Talib takes that to heart, and he tells his teammates that if I see him, with the chain on, I'm gonna take it. So during the game, Derek Carr throws a pass to Michael Crabtree, a fade route up the right sideline, and Aqib Talib breaks it up. So they both fall to the ground, and as they get up, they trade some barbs back and forth. And just in the most random, unexpected way, just a complete, a weird turn of events, he just reaches in and just snatches his chain off and turns around and walks away. And Michael Crabtree is he's bewildered. He's like, yo, what the hell is going on? And I'm watching like, yo, I've never seen this before. So, of course, Michael Crabtree says something to the referee, and even the referee's confused. He's like, damn, do I have a penalty for this? So no penalties, no fines, no nothing. So I'm sure at this point, Michael Crabtree, if he didn't like him before, he hates him now. So then we fast forward to the following season. I want to say another calendar year. So with Thanksgiving of the following year. So they're playing, I want to say it's in Oakland, and it's the first quarter, and it's a run and play Marshawn Lynch, and Michael Crabtree is blocking Aqib Talib. But when the whistle blows, he doesn't stop. He keeps driving them. So as Aqib Talib was going back, right on cue, he reaches in and snatches his chain again. And it just turns into a massive brawl. Both players get ejected. But crazy enough, the consequences weren't dire. They both got fined $500K. A lot of money for us normal people. For those guys make millions, so $500K is not that much. And I remember them originally getting suspended for 2 games, but they appealed and it got reduced to 1 game. So these guys lost a little bit of pocket change and they got suspended 1 game. And when you saw it on different sports networks, people were laughing about it. It was hilarious. So it wasn't something that was frowned upon or they felt like it was detrimental to the way that the league is viewed or anything like that. It was just 2 good players going after each other. So yeah. And for anyone that knows me, I don't condone chain snatching, nor should anybody that understands Black culture and understands the magnitude behind how disrespectful that is. So, but I will say this, it added some excitement to a boring 2017 season. So that's 2. So then we have 3. And I think you guys kind of knew that I would go this route, especially if we're talking some basketball. And that's Allen Iverson, when he stepped over Tyronn Lue at the end or during the 2001 NBA Finals, right? This was game 1. So not much context really needed behind this. Lakers were the creme de la creme. They were the most dominant team in the NBA in the early 2000s. They three-peated. And, you had Shaq, Kobe, Rick Fox, Derek Fisher, and then Allen Iverson was a cultural icon at the time. Everybody wanted to be Allen Iverson. And he unexpectedly led the 76ers to the finals with like Raja Bell, Eric Snow. And then, of course, he had Mutombo. Mutombo's a Hall of Famer. So long story short, everyone thought that the Lakers were going to completely destroy them and sweep them. So, and then you have Tyronn Lue, who played for the Lakers at the time, and he was pretty much a bubble player. Anybody that remembers, he wasn't that good of a player. He was more known as a hustle player, played some solid defense, but he was important for the Lakers in that series because outside of Kobe, they really didn't have anybody that could really match up with Allen Iverson in that way. So he was kind of dubbed the pseudo Allen Iverson stopper. So it's overtime at the end of that game 1 in LA. And I never forget it. Allen Iverson on the right wing, he drives to his right and then he crosses back to his left and he pulls back and hits a fadeaway jumper. So Tyronn Lue, of course, does what most defenders does, and he contests the shot. And then in the process, he trips. He falls on his butt, and he's looking and he watches the ball go in the hoop. And Allen Iverson, in the most disrespectful fashion, on his way back to the other side of the court to play defense, looks down and steps over him, And this moment just became, this is an iconic NBA moment. You can Google this and get to see the stock photo. That's just how big this moment is. And I just remember everybody going crazy, everybody talking about it at school. It was on sports networks for the next 2 to 3 weeks. But funny enough, it's disrespectful as that moment was. No one made too big of a deal of it. I would say that in the grand scheme of things, both players were able to take some glory from it. It added to Allen Iverson's legend, obviously, And by the way, the 76ers won that game. They beat the Lakers game 1. They didn't win another game in that series, but, that was like their consolation prize that they didn't get swept. So it added to Allen Iverson's legend. And for Tyronn Lue, surprisingly, he actually talks about this. He says that series against him guarding Allen Iverson actually made his career. That actually made teams view him like, okay, like this guy, he's willing to get in there and get after it. And I mean, it's Allen Iverson, one of the greatest players. Nobody felt like he was going to go in there and it was going to be pretty. It was going to be some ups and downs. So, and they both actually wind up becoming good friends because, they share a piece of NBA history. So I know you guys are asking, like you're throwing out all these, random examples. How do they tie into women's sports, and how do they tie into conduct in women's sports? And that's because for the most part, all these examples were deemed acceptable by mass media, right? And, you have a fair argument that instead of drawing just these massive negative reviews or negative attention, that they were kind of written off as like a boys will be boys type of deal, right? Boys will be boys, no need to cry about it. But I viewed it a different way. I view it as athletes will be athletes, competitors will be competitors. I don't think this is a gender thing. So, kind of going back to the Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark situation, taunting controversy, if that's what we want to call it. I don't see anything wrong with two dominant players, two players as talented as they are, coming for each other's throats. Anyone who watched the women's tournament, Caitlin Clark is not like, she talks trash too. As a matter of fact, she actually did that in one of her earlier games, right? So she, a little arrogant herself. She's down to earth, she's humble for the most part, but when she gets in a moment, she's competitive as well. She talks her trash. So, I don't mind two players coming for each other, even if one is more passive in the moment. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, she was following Caitlin and Caitlin was she just wanted to get back to her side of the court and just, come on, man. We don't want to hear none of that. It's this sports, and as crazy as it sounds, it's moments like that make sports exciting. It adds history, it adds context, it builds a story behind the wins and losses, right? Because without stories in sport, not just basketball, sports would be nothing, right? It'd just be two teams going back and forth and scoring. Right? Who cares about that? So, I think it's something that women's sports more specifically should pay attention to, is really harnessing those moments, harnessing those players, because what a league is supposed to do, a league builds its brand around its star players. And a lot of times, more often than not, star players come with big personalities, right? Some of the greatest players we've ever seen in any sports had big personalities. They were arrogant, they were cocky, right? They were difficult to handle by their coaching staffs and fellow teammates, right? That comes with the territory. Denzel Washington said it best in The Equalizer. He said, "You pray for the rain, you got to be willing to deal with the mud too." So realistically, I think women's basketball should be thankful, for that Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark exchange, because now I've never heard grown men say, "Man, I can't wait until next year to see these girls play again. I can't wait to see these two girls go back and forth the next 2 years." I've never heard men talk about not let alone college, but women's basketball that way. And that's what's happened. It's bringing attention to women's basketball, and to me, in a very positive way, and hopefully the WNBA can kind of take a step back and really figure out how can we build a brand around these two girls and some of the other talented players that are going to be coming into our league within the next 3 to 4 years. So they should be obsessed with how can they market around that brewing rivalry. Look, the NBA did it. Magic and Bird, the NBA was going under. People forget about that. The NBA, it wasn't looking too nice in the 60s and 70s. And then Magic and Bird, played in a national championship, and they kind of built, one went to LA, one went to Boston, and they built around and marketed around that rivalry, and it saved the NBA. So hopefully the WNBA can do some of the same things. But kind of applying this to women's sports as a whole, I got a newsflash for you guys. These women are athletes. They have adrenaline running through their bodies. They got competitive juices flowing, just like their male counterparts. So we shouldn't get mad when Amanda Nunes is being boastful in post-fight interviews after she knocked out Ronda Rousey. And Ronda Rousey was on a tear. So when Amanda Nunes was talking her trash, I said, "Hey, man, she earned that shit." We shouldn't get mad when, anyone that's watched, women's football, LFL, when we see these girls cursing and fighting and being aggressive, we shouldn't get mad about that. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed it because sometimes, we had Adrienne Michelle on the podcast not too long ago. She gave a great interview. Man, you watch some of her tapes, man, this girl was really violent, and she talked a lot of trash and stuff like that. Not very, look, by definition, not very ladylike, but it's good for the sport, right? And, looking at tennis, we shouldn't get mad, or we shouldn't view Serena Williams any different when she's arguing with the chair umpire. Right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. She's arguing. She feel like they holding women to a different standard than men. So the point is, I can go on and on. Champions are aggressive. Champions are outspoken. And it's that type of intensity and bravado that popularized the sports that we watch today. So I'm going to use a quote, Senator William Marcy. Everyone's heard this quote their whole life. The spoils go to the victor. Point blank, period. And moving forward, let's make sure we all make an effort to apply that quote to both men and women's sports. But I'll see you guys next time.